Hello and welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. This is another update episode. So, Dr. Cameron Stroyan, about a year and a half ago, we had him on the show on episode 2-10, and he bought into a very large practice. So, a partnership that is going really well for him, but he went in not knowing a lot of things that we know now about the podcast, and he crushed it. He's doing awesome. So this is the episode to update that, because we don't have a lot of partnership perspectives. We don't have a ton of people buying in as a partner. Most people are buying a practice outright or doing a startup. So his perspective is unique, and he did it right. I think you're going to see from this episode that it's totally working out for him. So this is the last pre-ownership flashback kind of season break. And then we're going to start up pretty quickly here our case acceptance season. So it's going to be an awesome season. We have great guests lined up. You guys are really going to enjoy it. But let's listen to this episode with Dr. Cameron Stroyan. Once again, we're not going to do an outro on this one. It's just me. So enjoy. Okay, I have back with us today DJ Destroyan, Dr. Cameron Stroyan. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. How about you, Richard?
Pretty good. It's been a while. I feel like we haven't talked or interacted or done anything because I've been in dark mode for the last year.
Fell off the radar.
A little off the radar, but I've seen you on popular Facebook pages, and more videos have continued to come out. So there was someone who made an off-color remark about one of your team members on the Dental Hacks Nation, and I loved your comment of, what is it that you said? You said, how do I send them a bag of dicks or something like that? like this person made like a really rude comment about one of your your team.
Some random person sent us an email, and we tried to look up their name. It was just, I think it was a fake account or something, but said that they had been researching our website and that they noticed that all of our staff members were obese. And our front desk member sent us that, and we were just in shock, and it was just embarrassing. So yeah, I got on Facebook and posted the email, and got quite the response. So it was kind of cool to see everyone back in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, like, it makes me think, like, is it one of your team members' ex-boyfriends, or, like someone just like trying to be an awful person?
It could be. Yeah.
But it's crazy to see, like, on these groups when stuff blows up like that. So back to the topic. I wanted to interview you about your experience now as a partner in a practice. So this isn't a route that we have had a lot of people on the show who've kind of taken this journey. And you really took us at face value. Like, we did season 1 and like laid out all the advantages of ownership, and you're like, okay, let's do it. Let's buy a practice. So you were in this thriving practice, and which came with a very hefty sticker price. And but you wanted to buy in, you wanted to be an owner, and so then I had the worry, like, oh crap, what if this doesn't work out for Cameron and we've misled him? Like, that's been my secret fear for all of our listeners, is that, like, we convince them that practice ownership is the best, and then it doesn't fit them, or it doesn't end up making them more money, or it doesn't end up turning out to be what they thought it was going to be. So this is the proof to see, like, was it worth it? Is this interview? So let's lay it out. So remind us the location of your practice and how long you practiced there before you bought in, and how that went down.
Okay. So yeah, I'm in a little town called Puyallup, Washington. It's about 45 minutes south of Seattle. So kind of in a rural-ish area, but it's actually kind of a booming town. So it's been growing rapidly ever since I kind of moved over here. So that's been nice. It's in a great location. The dentist that I work with, his name's Ryan, and we've known each other for about 8 years now, probably closer to 9. And
you met him like in dental school, right?
Well, I met him when I was an undergrad. He did the community health scholarship and worked at an Indian tribe at a town about 20 minutes from my hometown, and he lived on the golf course in my hometown, and it worked out great. We kept in touch all through dental school, and when I was in my 4th year, he reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come work for me? And it worked out great. So that's the backstory there.
And Ryan is a stud. He does, like, what percentage would you say is surgery and versus general dentistry?
Yeah, so he's a general dentist, but essentially he's a oral surgeon, so he doesn't
plays
really do
oral surgeon
any
on
general
TV.
dentistry. Yes, so he does pretty much all sedation, implants, wisdom teeth, all on four, you name it. He doesn't hardly ever do a filling or crown.
Yeah. So between the two of you, I mean, and the way it worked out from last episode is that you came into this practice and someone had just left in a way. And so there was like a full schedule of production for you to walk into.
Well, he hadn't left. It was Ryan. So he had decided all he wanted to do was focus on just surgery. So he basically left the whole restorative portion of his practice and handed it over to me from day one. So I had a full restorative schedule walking in, which worked out great for me. And it also worked out for him because he was able to focus on exactly what he wanted to do, which was more of the surgery side.
Okay, cool. So you were doing well, and you know, as an associate, I think you were pretty happy with how things were going.
Mm-hmm.
How far into, you know, we graduated 2015, right?
Yep.
I'm just trying to think. 2015. So when did you decide, okay, maybe I should buy into this? How long had it been?
Yeah, so we had been talking about this before I even started as an associate, and the initial goal was after a year I was going to buy in. Ended up being about a year and a half.
Okay.
And there were some little hiccups along the way, which we talked about in the last podcast, but not much off target. So I was able to work in the practice for a year and a half before I decided to buy in. So I really knew what I was getting into, and I think that helped out tremendously.
Well, and you also knew, you know, the systems, the team, you know, like you were part of the practice at that point, which was awesome from like a ease of transition, but also not awesome in terms of like leverage. Like he knows he had you.
Yes.
There's not a lot that you can like save to like negotiate down the price. And that was something we talked about last time. And you successfully did a little bit.
Yeah.
But in the end, you still had to buy half of a very healthy, thriving practice. So what was the practice collecting roughly, and what did you end up buying in half of it for?
Yeah, so we talked about it last time, but we had negotiated before I ever became an associate that we'd take the value that the practice was worth when I started, and the value it was worth at the time I wanted to buy in, and kind of average those two, so it worked out well for both of us. So we did a little negotiating, and how did it work? So what he did was I bought in 2017 in February.
Okay.
So we took the value of the practice in 2015 and 2016 and averaged that out. And then the value of 2016 and 2017, averaged that out to the halfway point. And gosh, you might have to cut this part out, but
No, this is fine. And it's complicated because like you kind of have to make this up every time you do it. Like there is no set, like as a partner coming in, it's awesome when they're willing to work with you and say like, hey, I'll let you credit some of how much you've grown this practice towards the purchase price. And it sounds like he was reasonable about that.
Yeah, he was very reasonable. And it worked out. So we essentially took the price when I started versus when I bought in, averaged that out. And the goal that my attorney had suggested was 85% of that number. And it ended up being 93%, so a little higher than I wanted. But come to find out, he was pretty set on that 93% number, so he wasn't going to sell for anything less. And like you said, he had all the leverage, and I really had no room to work with. So he initially, I think it was like 95%. I talked about a couple percent, so helped a little bit, but essentially he wasn't budging from that number, and it actually worked out pretty well.
So at this point, had you so what did that price end up being? It was somewhere in the like 1.2 million.
So I bought
range.
in for half of it at 1.23.
1.23. Okay, cool. So you had some student loans at this point still unpaid, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's putting you probably around $1.5 million of debt. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, you're like, okay, I hope this works.
Yeah.
And we were waiting for like your tax situation to shake out too, because it's like you don't know as an owner as much how much you're going to make until you pay all those taxes, and you can project it out and, you know, prepay, and that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, there's all those kind of write-offs and deductions, and that all plays into what you made on paper versus what you actually take home and get to use and enjoy.
Yes.
So how much of this are you willing to lay out? So as an associate, what were you making? And now as an owner, as a part owner in this practice, how are things working out financially?
Yeah, so like you said, it's very difficult. I was waiting for all the taxes to get laid out, and it took a while because we had to file for some extensions because there were all sorts of nuances that we didn't even know about, that we had to file for all these extensions.
As partners, so like the taxes were like
it was just really
even more
confusing,
complex?
and yeah,
Okay.
our CPA, who's a certified, just a dental CPA, she was having trouble with all this stuff, and there were just little things
Wow.
here and there where he was supposed to pay for something, but I ended up paying half of it. Things like that. That before I even bought in, it just made it really confusing.
Sure.
So in the end, in terms of gross, I think I talked to you about it, but it's about 2.5, 3 times more than I'm making as an owner than I was as an associate.
Okay.
So worked out really well in terms of that. Something I talked about with you and not on the last podcast was that I was extremely naive buying into this practice. I didn't do nearly as much research as I should have done. This podcast was just starting. I was kind of going through it as you guys were, and you weren't into the buy-in process yet. You're still in season 1. So I didn't have the luxury of listening to all these other people with all these experiences. I was so naive that I didn't realize you cannot deduct your practice loan payment, or it's not a business expense. You can't write it off. You can write off the interest, but my interest rate right now is 1.9%. So that's a very negligible amount.
it's a great loan.
Yes.
For taxes, it doesn't really do you much.
So that's how naive I was, and that's something we can get into later, but should have done a lot more research. But in the end, it worked out really, really well for me. I'm making a lot more as an owner than an associate, and you can ask me as many questions as you want about that. I'm open to talking.
Well, cool.
Honestly.
Well, I mean, 2.5 to 3 times what you were making before. I mean, that's not a small jump in income, and I would assume that you guys didn't upgrade your lifestyle 2.5 or 3 times, and maybe you did. Maybe you've bought 2 to 3 times more cars, and you tripled your home size. But my thought is that leverage would allow you, if you wanted to pay down those student loans, to pay down that practice loan, or to invest in other things. And so that extra income really would more than double or more than triple your actual disposable income that I can make progress on my life goals with.
Yes.
Has that been true?
Exactly. Yeah. So we've maxed out our 401ks. We've started education funds for both our little girls. There's a lot of benefits of being an owner that we didn't even imagine beforehand, that we're trying to take advantage of. And I reached out to you a few months ago talking about, should I just pay off a big chunk of my student loans now with all this other disposable income? What's the best? I mean, most of our loans are at 7.9%. So I was thinking that would be a good investment. I mean, basically a guaranteed 7.9% investment, and you gave me some great advice there. So I haven't done that plunge yet, but I'm thinking about taking a huge chunk out of the student loans here soon, and hopefully getting those paid off before you know it.
Well, and at this point, are you really even worried about your student loans and your practice loan? Like, is it something that keeps you up at night, that stresses you out, that like?
Oh no,
eats at your
not at
stomach
all.
lining?
It's not stressful, but it is a huge chunk. So, the practice loan itself is about $13,000 a month. My student loan, I'm on a 10-year plan. The student loan's about $4,500 a month. So all in on my loans, I'm about $17.5 a month. And you need to keep in mind that's post-tax dollars that you need to pay almost all of this with. So I'm having to make roughly, I mean, I haven't done the math officially, but probably about $25,000 just to break even, essentially. So it's a good chunk, and I haven't forgotten about that, but I'm able to live comfortably beyond that, and it's worked out well.
Has there ever been a month where, like, ebbs and flows, people talk about September and, different months that just aren't as good in a dental practice. Has there been any months where, like, that's been an issue, where things have dipped and you're, like, starting to get a little bit worried about cracking that nut and your mortgage and everything else?
Not necessarily. It's been pretty steady. I was looking back just recently about, because we take 35% of our production, our adjusted production.
Okay.
That's how we pay ourselves, me and Ryan. And my pay has been pretty steady. I mean, it's luckily growing steadily, but pretty constant throughout the whole time. So it hasn't fluctuated much at all. The only thing that fluctuates is our owner draws. So we have a joint bank account through the practice, and we like to keep at least 200,000 in there, just in case, you never know what's going to happen. So emergencies and such. Every time it hits 300,000, we each take a $50,000 draw. So we like to have that as kind of our little cushion, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like a irregular income that just like when it happens, it happens. Sometimes I'm sure it happens sooner than others, and it just kind of works out.
So this summer was kind of frustrating because I was like, we've gone like 3 months and haven't taken one. What's going on? We were taking several, like one every month or two at the beginning of the year. What's going on? And Ryan reassured me. He's like, this just happens. There's ebbs and flows, like you were saying, and it's all going to work out. And sure enough, we've taken 2 in the last 2 months. So that worked out well.
Okay. So that's nice that you've set it up that you just kind of do that 35% that you pay yourselves. And that's like you can live on this income and, not have to worry about things. And then that owner profit
comes just, in. Like a bonus.
Like a bonus. Yeah. Cool. No, that's great. And I think that one of the amazing things that you've bought into, like you had to pay for the privilege to kind of take that owner draw and also be a partner here, but you've also bought into his ability to produce. So with like a partner who does such high dollar procedures all the time, that's like a really nice, like if you're going to buy in with someone, you had to pay more for that, but it also allows you to share that. And I'm sure that you're also crushing it with the production and everything like that, but it's nice that he's got kind of those procedures on lockdown and he's doing these all on 4 cases and full mouth extractions and wisdom teeth and all that. And you can focus on the bread and butter dentistry. So it's kind of a cool split that you guys have. It's like you share an office with an oral surgeon.
Yeah, no, it's actually kind of funny that you say that because I'm like, I want him to produce, keep doing these all in 4 cases. And every time I have a big day, he's like, dang it, we got to pay you, whatever. And I'm like, I want you to produce all these huge numbers. Like, keep it up. And it's kind of a competition, but it's kind of funny at the same time. That's one of my points I was going to bring up was, I think most people are wondering, why would this guy want to bring in an associate or a partner when he's doing all these high dollar procedures? But I actually think it works out well for both of us because he wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for having a partner or at least an associate. If he had an associate, most associates, their goal is probably to buy in at some point. So he'd just keep turning over associate after associate. And I think, it worked out well for us because he's able to do exactly what he wants to do, and I'm able to do what I want to do right now, and it just worked out for both.
So has the practice grown since you've bought in? Like, the valuation from where it was a year and a bit ago to now? Do you feel like you're both producing more?
Yeah,
overall?
It's grown huge. And the funny thing is his uncle, who is also an associate of us now, is about 63 years old. So he's about to retire. He's basically just checked out at this point, which is kind of funny because he's taken vacation after vacation. He's working 2 days a week, 3 days, some weeks. But with him and his huge drop in vacation time or increase in vacation time, we're able to keep growing the practice, and it's actually bumped up quite a bit. I think 2.9 was the number I bought into, and I think at 6 months in, or after June, we were projected to do about 3.4.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's significant.
Yeah.
First, a word from our sponsor, Q Optics. Okay, we've got back with us Brent Downs from Q Optics, the director of sales. And you were about to tell me a story about a friend that you met while helping him out and showing him a product.
Yeah, I got tons of these kind of stories, but the one that sticks out to me, Dr. Kenny Crossland, he's out in West Texas. I first met him 1989, 1990, and tried to sell him a pair of loops, and he said, no, not interested.
Okay.
And over the years, I would see him at different meetings, or I'd be out in West Texas. And this went on for years and years and years. And it got to the point where I wasn't so much interested in selling anything to him,
Sure.
but we just became friends. And he has a mutual friend of mine as well. So kind of the three of us, became friends. Every time I would see him at a state meeting or a regional meeting, we weren't talking about loops. We were, catching up on family.
Sure.
And so lo and behold, in 2014, 24 years after the fact, he comes up to me and says, I want to buy some loops and headlight from you. How's that sound? And I was completely floored that he was actually ready to pull the trigger after 24 years of visiting. And so it was secondary to the relationship. It was a lot of fun. We still talk about it. It only took him 24 years to make a decision.
If you're the type that needs some time before you make a purchasing decision, that's totally fine. You can email sales@qoptics.com with the promo code SP16 for $100 off a pair of loops or $300 off a loops and light combo. Q Optics. Let's have a better look. Let's go back and talk about what were some expectations that you had one way or another about being a partner, and what did it actually end up being? What were you worried about before buying in, and was that an issue?
Mm-hmm. So again, I was very naive. I thought, I'm going to buy into this practice. It's going to be awesome. Everything's going to go smoothly, and I'm just going to make more money. That's kind of the mindset I had. I walk in there and buy in, and little did I know there's so much stress involved in buying an office. The vast majority, I would say, comes from staff issues.
Okay.
And there's things that I never had to deal with before. For example, a very specific example just happened this past Thursday.
Okay, this is very recent, very fresh.
So we have one assistant who's been doing the ordering for years and years. Has done it one way. We use Patterson. We use Patterson for pretty much all of our products, and obviously pay a premium price for that, but it's been just consistent. We hired a new assistant about a month ago, and she mentioned to me that she thought that we could be saving a significant amount if we use sites like Net32 and Amazon, sure, things like that. The only thing is, our assistant who's been doing the ordering is very territorial, and this ordering is her thing, so you cannot step on her toes. It's that's her baby. She's been with the office for, I think, 17, 18 years. Wow. And she's been there way longer than I have. So she's gotten in there, and you don't want to step on her toes. She's awesome. She's a really, really good assistant. I love having her. But this ordering is kind of her thing. So we were contemplating how to approach her to address this issue and start ordering certain things through Net32, other websites. And then we talked about this after hours on Thursday between me and the new assistant. And I was leaving the office. I had already left the office. She was busy. I sent her a text. I said, hey, don't worry, because she was really stressing out. I don't want to step on this assistant's toes. It makes me really nervous. I know she's not going to take it well. What can we do? So I sent her a text. Don't worry about it. I'll talk to Christine tomorrow. It's all going to be good. Accidentally sent that to Christine, the assistant who's been doing all of the ordering for 13 plus years. And as soon as I hit send, I see it. I try to delete it before it sends. Doesn't work. She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? It wasn't even a bad text. It just said, I'm going to talk to her tomorrow, see what we can do. We'll make it work. Don't worry. So I get to work the next morning, and this assistant is just bawling in tears, just crying. She is infuriated at me. And actually,
what did she think? What did she assume?
She thinks that we're going behind her back and talking about her without her knowing, and trying to do this ordering with behind her back, essentially. So she's it's still not quite settled yet. So that's been thinking about this nonstop this whole weekend. So like literally I could not sleep last night. I'm like, how am I going to deal with this? Because it didn't go well Friday. She's just very pissed off, angry at me, crying the whole day. And left Friday. I said, give me a call Friday. I think there's a huge misunderstanding here. We need to work this out. It's not a big deal. I said, call me on your way back and we'll talk about it. Never got a call. And I'm just freaking out all night. So those are the joys of ownership that I never thought I'd, have to deal with. But one of the downsides, we actually don't have an office manager. We had an office manager. And about the month I bought in, she had a baby and then never came back to work. So we never hired an office manager, a new one. We didn't plan to have one. It actually worked out pretty well without her, but we don't have anyone to deal with these little issues like this that normally you say, hey, go deal with this, and it's taken care of. So we don't have that luxury anymore. So I've been having to deal with a lot of the stress from the staff.
The day-to-day team issues. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that it's so nice. Like right now at my clinic, I'm not the in charge of the clinic, and I was projected to be. It's like a 32 chair clinic with a bunch of docs, a bunch of assistants. And this January, I was supposed to take charge of it. That may or may not happen, but it's so nice to just not have to deal with anything, to not have to run the team meetings, to not have to that sensation of just like, not my job, not my problem. It now is your job and it is your problem. Very much so. Everything. And there's so much. I mean, this assistant, she's done this job so well. She's kept the office running as a well-oiled machine. And like, so it's like, she can take this as this like deeply personal, like you don't trust me. And like, you don't think I'm doing this good enough. And you're like, no, we're just trying to like cut on our overhead a little bit. Cause we're paying out the nose to Patterson. And, so you're just like, you're trying to do something good for the office overall, and it all kind of implodes on you.
And it didn't help that I accidentally sent the text message to her. So
well done.
But that was kind of one of my other points. Like, I know this whole podcast is about becoming an owner and the steps to become an owner. Everyone I think needs to realize it. There's a lot that comes with being an owner. It's not as easy as it sounds, I think, at first. So when I was an associate, like you kind of just said in your situation, you don't have to deal with any of this stuff. It's easy. Just come to work, show up, do dentistry, and get your paycheck. And once you become an owner, it's a whole new ballgame. So there's a lot involved. It's definitely worth it in terms of finances for sure. But just be prepared. I think that was my number one piece of advice was know what you're getting into, because it's a whole new ballgame.
Well, and it's two separate skill sets. It's management and it's leadership. It's like you have to be able to lead and inspire and help your team reach these goals. And at the same time, you have to manage the day-to-day, because you don't have an office manager. Like, you are the office manager. Mm-hmm. And so both of those things are hard to do. And they're both different skill sets that a lot of us need to work on. And like myself included, I know that I have tons of growing pains in both of these areas. And everyone can usually get better. Like, no one is the best leader or the best manager that they'll ever be. So you're going to learn from accidental texts and fun drama. And okay, cool. No, that's a great perspective and a great piece of advice. What else? Was there anything else that was different, that you thought it was going to be one way and you had some assumptions of how, this would be, and then it ended up being a different way? Or something that was like, I thought it would be this way, and it turned out to be exactly how you thought it was going to be?
Let's see. I talked about the practice loan and not being deductible. That was a big one for me.
You're like, oh yeah, I'll just deduct, that whole loan payment.
One thing that I didn't do, like I said, I did not do nearly enough research. Listening to the podcasts of George and other people that have been on the podcast, like Derek Williams, and they're doing all this research while they're still in dental school. And I'm like, I listened to these after I bought into practice. Would have been nice to do it beforehand. But I'm just like, I did not do nearly this much research. I think becoming an owner, and especially buying a practice straight out of dental school, is a huge task. Props to them for doing it. I think it takes a very, very special person to be able to do that. I know that if I had bought a practice straight out of dental school, I would be completely overwhelmed. I did not know what I was getting into. and it would have been a nightmare. So definitely props to them for doing that. But I want to warn people, I wouldn't rush into becoming an owner. Like I said, I took a year and a half, and I was very, very comfortable with the position I was in and thought I knew what I was getting into. And even after a year and a half, there are still things that I had no clue about.
Yeah.
And it's just a little overwhelming. So I know, again, this podcast is about becoming an owner, but you really need to make sure you find the right practice, make sure you're comfortable, a good location. I mean, there's a lot of things you need to think about, and it's not just, I need to become an owner as quick as I can. I think that's kind of the wrong way to go about it.
Cool. No, and that's great to hear, because we do tend to spotlight these individuals who've done these amazing feats of early ownership. And it's definitely not the average path, nor the recommended path, unless you know that it's going to eat you up inside every day that you're not an owner of a practice. So we talked about the financial structure with the way that you guys are doing it. You pay your overhead, you pay yourselves 35%, and then you share the profit. It seems like a real nice, clean structure that you guys have there. In terms of overall practice ownership and decision making and deciding, do we do X or Y? How have you guys balanced that? Him kind of being the long-standing owner, you're the new partner. How do you guys make decisions? And, I'm assuming you're 50-50 partners. Mm-hmm. So, you rock, paper, scissors when you disagree. Yeah. Like what's, how does that go down?
No, that's been one of the more frustrating parts for me, to be honest, because technically we are 50-50 owners, but it is definitely more what he says kind of goes. And I'm kind of a pushover in that way. I don't like to fight back. He's very strong-willed, and I'm kind of easygoing. And it's definitely, if he wants something one way, it typically gets done that way. And it's kind of frustrating for me, but the good news is he's an awesome dentist, an awesome owner. He usually knows what's right. It's just there's little things here and there that if he wants it one way, it's going to get done.
Huh. So I think, like, in a lot of ways, you've gotten really lucky in that you had him as a contact, as a friend, as then a boss, and now as a partner. Because this is where partnerships break down, is like where, personalities, decision-making, finances, and the fact that there's plenty of money to go around kind of soothes maybe some of the differences, where it's like, oh, well, at least we're crushing it. Yeah. It's like, if you were worried about paying your bills and someone was going through a divorce and, their house was, for sale, or, if your personal lives were in turmoil, and there wasn't as much money just kind of covering both of you, mm-hmm. It would be a whole lot more stressful if he was kind of making decisions that you disagreed with.
Definitely. And I think I'm in a unique situation in that I've known him for so long. We've gotten along great. Our wives are best friends. Our kids are about the same age. We live about 2 blocks from each other. So it's a little different situation that we have. Another benefit that we have is that we do totally different procedures. So he's focusing all on surgery, whereas I'm doing pretty much all of the restorative, endo, that type of stuff. So it works out well in that we're not competing, I'm going to do this crown, you're going to do this one. It works out well in that way, and that we're not competing for certain procedures, for sure. I think that's huge for a partnership. I don't think our partnership would be nearly as strong if we were both doing the same type of procedures.
Yeah, no, and the fact that you guys are kind of symbiotic in that way, mm-hmm. where you're helping each other out, but in different ways. Has there been anything that, like, looking back, you're like, oh, I was totally right on that decision, and he went the other way, and now you're like, man, I wish we had done it that way. Like, is there anything still nagging at you that you feel like he made this call, and now you wish you could change it?
I mean, there's little things here and there. I don't know specific examples. The first thing that jumped to mind was there was an all-on-4 case he did before I ever bought into the practice. Okay. And then it turns out it's failed. 2 of the implants have failed. They need to redo the case. And then they're redoing the case and we've been working with a new lab since then. So the lab agreed to just do it for their cost, which is, I think, $12,000 for the upper and lower, I think, both. So they were just going to do it for $12,000. But this, he just paid for with practice money, the joint practice money, even though I didn't receive any of the profits from the case initially, since it was done before I ever bought in. So yeah, little things like that. I called him up. I'm like, hey, I just saw this bill for $12,000 from a case that was done 3 years ago, and that was just last week. So we haven't really worked out the details there, but those are just the uncomfortable type of conversations that we have to have, and it's weird being good friends with him, and we'll see where it goes. But hopefully, I don't have to take half of the burden there. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's dicey because there's no obvious answer. There's no like, oh yeah, like this is 100% your case, so deal with it. It's like now you guys own the practice and deal with, so it's like you can argue it either way, and it sucks for you, and you end up being the loser if you have to, not the loser, but like there is maybe there's some compromise in the middle, but I don't know what it would be. But it's just one of those like, oh, okay, how's this going to go? And every time you have to bring that up with one of your friends and kind of follow up on it, and you're kind of family at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're basically, like you said in the last one, we're basically have two marriages. So married to our wives and then married to our partners. It's two different relationships there.
Has there been any big like investments of either like marketing or consultants or equipment that you guys have had to buy and like talk about and discuss?
There really hasn't been too much. The good news is, like you've kind of talked about, it was a well-oiled machine before I ever bought in. So didn't really need to make many changes. He really started bumping up his all-on-4 cases and promoting those. We started advertising those on the radio.
Okay.
So that's been big for us. I think he's doing probably 4 or 5 all-on-4 cases a month, in addition to all the implants he's been doing. So his goal is eventually to focus more on the all-on-4 procedures, and I'll start picking up some of the more basic implants, and then stick to the restorative process. So yeah, nothing in particular that we've really changed that's really stuck out.
Okay, cool.
I wanted to take a minute to talk about the sponsor for today's episode, Lendeavor. Lendeavor is the modern lender to dental practices. With innovative software, exceptional service, and decades of combined experience in dental practice lending, Lendeavor is reshaping the experience of getting a practice loan. Practice owners are some of our economy's most highly trained and hardest working entrepreneurs. Yet, financing a practice takes too long and costs too much. Lendeavor is a team of credit experts, software engineers, computer scientists, financiers, lawyers, and academics that have come together to deliver market-leading rates, speed, and convenience. They've built software that takes complicated transactions, like buying your first practice, and makes them simple. As a result, you spend less time applying for your loan, and they spend less time processing it. This efficiency means faster funding and lower rates for you. Whether you're acquiring your first practice, remodeling, or expanding your existing practice, buying commercial real estate, or even updating equipment, take the first step today by pre-qualifying online in minutes. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Lendeavor's online pre-qualification is safe, secure, and seamless, and pre-qualifying with Lendeavor will never affect your credit score. Click the link in the show notes or send an email to info@lendeavor.com to learn more. Financing made or arranged pursuant to California Financing Law, license number 60DBO53100.
So how about advice for other people looking at a partnership? Like what would you tell someone who's like, oh yeah, I've got this office. You didn't do maybe some of the like demographics, numbers due diligence, but you definitely did your relationship due diligence and like practice fit due diligence, and you every other way you've done like the important stuff that ends up being what makes or breaks a partnership. So what would you tell someone else who's interested in buying in a situation like this?
Well, like I said, I started early. I started while I was in undergrad still, and that's where I met him, and that's where the seed was kind of planted. We actually became really good friends and were golfing partners, things like that, before I ever even started dental school, and then kind of just kept in touch. So I think building a relationship early on is really important. I think it's kind of a unique situation and one that's kind of difficult to come across. So I realize, I'm kind of rare in that situation. But if at all possible, building that relationship early was a huge, huge plus. Like I said, our wives are best friends now. Our kids get along great. I don't know if anyone else can really replicate that, but it worked out well in our case. So I would say, I wouldn't rush into it too quickly. in dental school it's a tricky situation because, like I said, reaching out. I knew him before dental school, so if you can meet someone before dental school and kind of plant that seed and not necessarily talk about the logistics of it too early, but at least meet some dentists. I met with probably 10 different dentists before I ever went to dental school, and I had a solid background to fall back on. My plan was to go back to my hometown where I grew up and take over my dentist practice. My wife, Jenny, wasn't too keen on that because it's a really small town. There's not much to do, all that sort of thing.
How big was that town? Like,
it's about 2,000 people.
Okay, now that I'm living in a town of 4,000, like I have some perspective on what small town means.
Yeah, so she didn't want to go back there. But I knew probably 10 dentists around the area before I ever went to dental school, and just kind of kept in touch with all of them before I even went. I talked to several people in dental school that didn't know really any dentist, and I thought that was kind of strange to me. I mean, A, they're the ones who kind of convinced me to become a dentist because I had shadowed them for so long. And B, you got to have some sort of relationship or plan moving forward. I think if you're in your fourth year and it's kind of January, March, February, that was backwards, but getting
Sure.
toward the end of your fourth year and you haven't really found an office yet or a partnership in particular, that's a little late in the ball game, I would say.
Well, and especially that's great advice for dental students because it's like dentists have their defenses down when someone's a dental student. Like they want to foster and teach and help. And then when you're like a potential associate or a potential partner or buying in or buying out, it's like there's not this like, oh, let me take you under my wing and show you everything and you kind of build this relationship. It's more of like oh, okay, you're now either competition or a business, associate. And so it's harder to have that kind of same sort of initial relationship. So I think that's great advice. If you're still in dental school, I would say when you go back home for, holidays or whatever it is in the summer, go try and meet as many dentists as possible in the area that you want to end up at, because that's kind of that time is you can't get that back of when you're still a dental student. You're kind of this innocent, like, oh, let's help you out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when fourth year, and during Christmas break, I think fourth year, I went back and met with Ryan and then two other dentists who I'd been keeping in touch with that I really liked their practices, knew they were very successful, met with them and got 3 offers that weekend.
Cool.
And so that was very beneficial. And like I said, I've been keeping in touch with them the whole time. And it was a nice little backbone to fall back on.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, is there anything else, because you wrote up some notes of stuff you want to talk about. Is there anything else on that list that we kind of haven't hit?
Well, I think one of the keys to being a successful dentist, just be a good person. It's really not that difficult. I mean, if you treat people respectfully and nicely and treat them like you would want to be treated yourself, I mean, they're not going to know the difference if you added a central fossa to a molar while you're doing a composite. They're not going to know these nuances of the technical aspect of dentistry. If you're a good person, treat them respectfully and like you would want to be treated, I think the rest kind of speaks for itself and the patients will come. Like, for instance, we don't ever charge out core buildups. If we need them, we just do a core buildup and don't charge it out to the patient. Saves them money, saves some insurance money they can spend elsewhere. And it's just little things like that. We'll do freebies here and there. And I think the patients really respect that. If you treat them like you would want to be treated yourself, it speaks volumes.
I will say that as a patient, that's great advice. I will say as a patient, I had a composite place that had some like legit anatomy in it. And I was like, what the heck is this hole in my tooth? Like, why am I getting food trapped here all the time? And it turns out like, oh no, I put some anatomy in it. And I'm like, oh, I like my fillings that are just like dishes. Those actually feel way better than the rest of my that filling. So no, totally. Well, awesome. This has been really cool. And I feel like it's amazing that you went in feeling like, okay, I want to be a part of this. I want to buy into this practice. You'd set everything up for a long time, but you didn't know necessarily all of the ins and outs of what you were getting yourself into. But it worked out, I would say, better than I could have hoped for you. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was legitimately like, okay, I hope he makes at least more money as an owner than he did as an associate.
I think you were more scared for me than I was scared for myself, which is part of the problem, but it's actually a good thing because I would have driven myself crazy if I would have been that
worried
stressed
about
out
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I knew it was a well-oiled machine, like you said, and I just knew, knowing Ryan, that it was going to work out. So I kind of had that benefit going in. I just thought this was going to be easy. It wasn't by any means easy, but it did work out, and it's paid off for sure in the long run.
Cool. Well, and the other thing I would say is that I've heard some people express the sentiment that the kind of person I'd want to buy in a practice with is the kind of person that would have this well-oiled machine. And then they're like, but I don't want to buy into a practice like that because it's going to come with a bigger price tag.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that expressed like recently within our little Facebook group for shared practices. And I think this is a case in point where, like, no, if they've got a well-oiled machine, you're going to pay more for it. But it justifies the price tag because it pays for itself. Like,
yes.
That's the whole point.
Exactly.
Rather than take the risk of like, oh, I think with this partner, with our powers combined, we can make this practice better. Like, no, just buy be a 50% owner of a really good practice. And that's what I did with George. I'd rather be a 50% owner of shared practices with George on the podcast than the podcast dying out in residency. So it's like, you want to have someone with you that you're practicing with that has that ambition, has that drive, has those systems. Why try and recreate that for yourself? So I really respect you. Just like, okay, let's do this. $1.2 million. Okay, I'm gonna buy this practice, and it's totally paid off.
Yeah, and I listened to Derek Williams' podcast again last week, I think, and my story is the complete opposite of his. He bought a really cheap practice and totally turned it around, versus I bought a very well-run practice and just kind of sustained and slowly growing the thing. So both seems like have worked out very well. So there's not one way to go about it. There's multiple ways. So I think having as many different perspectives as you can on this show has been really helpful. And
Cool.
What you guys are doing has been awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks, man. Well, thanks for being honest and candid and kind of sharing your perspective as well. So I think people will really appreciate that, especially because we really don't have that many partnerships on the show. So yours is kind of this little case study of awesomeness that we can point to and say, no, it can totally work. Look, Cam did it. You can totally do it too. You're not as awesome as Cam because he's a DJ on the side and he's amazing. But
that is one of the more awkward things is when I introduce him to my friends. I say, this is my partner, Ryan. And people get a little confused. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, exactly.
Who's coming out of the closet now, Cameron?
I'm watching Richard, and he's sitting in his
giving
closet as we speak. So it's just an inside joke.
He's giving me a hard time. As soon as we got on this call, he's like, when are you going to come out of the closet, Richard? And I'm like, I'm way too deep in being a happily married Mormon to come out of the closet now. So, cool. Well, thank you so much, Dr. DJ Destroyan. You're the man. We appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
We'll talk to you next time, okay?
The metrics that matter most, brought to you by Practice by Numbers. As an owner, manager, and producer, you have a lot on your mind, to say the least. Most of us were not trained to run a business, so we piece it together the best we can. Understanding a few key metrics in your practice is a first step to finding success in your business. Success is always a measure from some starting point. Practice by Numbers dashboard analytics software provides a simple way for you to track the metrics that matter most. With this in mind, today we will explore hygiene pre-appointment rate. Improvements to this metric add efficiency and productivity to your practice. When this number is low, you waste resources tracking down patients to fill your chairs, and ultimately you lose some patients. Many practices only pre-appoint about 50 to 60% of the hygiene recall patients, while 90% is very achievable. Follow these steps to help your team achieve 90 to 95% pre-booking. It all starts with awareness. Where are you now? Look at your hygiene pre-appointment rate for the previous year and then month. Make your team aware of this metric and commit as a team to achieving 90% pre-booking. At your daily huddle, review yesterday's pre-booking rate and commit to calling anyone not appointed to schedule them now while it's fresh in their minds. Help team members with verbal skills to aid them in appointing the reluctant patients that they might encounter. Set your reminder system to give patients 2 weeks notice before an appointment so they can feel comfortable appointing, knowing that they can call to adjust their appointment if they discover they have a conflict. To learn more about using smart data to manage your business, visit practicebynumbers.com.